On today's show, I'm joined by new co-host Sebastian Hyde to talk about the Metropolitan Division's standout draft hauls. We'll just talk about the entire division together, who picked who, and the standouts from that class, all coming up on Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday, during the scouting year. In the summer, it'll be 3 days a week. I'm joined by Sebastian Hyde from Dobber Prospects. We work together all year in order to bring you the best prospect content in the region. Sebastian, we are here to talk about the Metropolitan Division. Now, we are going to start with probably the best haul of the entire NHL. But before we get into that,
the two best hauls. I'm not going to pick sides on this just yet.
For sure. But before we get into that, just make sure to like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. And if you're listening to this on your favorite podcasting platform, make sure to make us your first listen of the day. It's always very much appreciated. So let's get right into it with Carolina's draft haul. Oh my goodness. All right. So we start with Bradley Nadeau at 30th overall. And I'll just empathize that we're starting with Bradley Nadeau because it only goes up from there. Bradley Nadeau is arguably a top 5 shooter in this draft, right?
I think his shot, especially in terms of like raw power, and considering that he's 160 pounds, that's pretty impressive. It's like Jagger Firkus level like shooting ability, and he pairs that like with impressive playmaking. He's really intelligent. He's very manipulative. He is a strong handler and a decent skater. But I think both the handling and the skating, a few little fine-tuning aspects could really improve it a ton. The upside with Nadeau is spectacular, and I have an inkling that his freshman season in the NCAA is going to really rise his stock. And he was my biggest late riser on my draft board. Throughout the season, I was skeptical, and I think like maybe a month ago, I sat down and spent an entire day just delving into Nadeau because I figured this is a player I should adore, and I was curious as to why I hadn't like had that impression just yet.
I was curious of that as well. I was very confused as to why he wasn't like in your top 15.
I think it was a sample issue. I think I only logged like 2.5 or 3 viewings beforehand, and they were okay. And then I spent an entire day going through like 7 games of his, and I was like, he's a top 20 prospect for me, and he ended up at 19. So he rocketed up my board, and I made sure it wasn't just reactionary. Like I watched 7 games in a day, and it completely changed my outlook on him, and the upside is tremendous. So when the Hurricanes picked him in the first round, I was unsurprised.
Of course they did.
Of course. Who else?
Speaking of which, their next 2 picks are 2 favorites of mine.
FUS,
Felix Ingersorum, one of the best playmakers in this draft, on top of being a high-end defensive contributor. I really like the profile. Exactly. I really like the profile that he brings to Carolina. But for me, the main pick that really just stands out to me as just of course they did. It's Jaden Perron at 94th. I had him ranked at 12th, I believe.
I had him
12th
13.
overall. Yeah, so we're kind of in the same range, in the same boat regarding what we think of Jaden Perron. 94th overall is absolutely ridiculous in terms of the value you're getting. I don't know if he maybe bombed some interviews, if he wasn't doing too well off the ice, things we don't know.
The production wasn't great. That's my sense. My sense was that it was okay production while playing quite at least to start the year. He played a lot with Celebrini, and he's undersized, but the brain. I don't know if any player has better off-puck offensive zone movement in this draft class. I think others are at his level, like Bedard, obviously. I think Michkov's up there, Benson as well. But he is so intelligent, and
the hands on top of that. He's got some
hands are great.
In the draft. Yeah.
Look, he needs to add pace to his game. Obviously, he needs to bulk up. That's okay. And he's not a surefire thing. I can understand why some teams were hesitant to pick him in the first round. At the same time, if you're getting him at 94th overall, you can't complain. But
Exactly.
I want to go back one step, Felix Ungersorum, because we were, I think, the only public outlet to like be relatively high on him in terms of like a top 40 talent.
Yeah.
And I think we had him ranked at about 37 at the end of the year. And to see him picked inside the top 64 brought me a lot of joy. I was also chatting with the other public scouts I was sitting with at the draft, and they were all still quite skeptical of how he translates. But I mean, I think we are two of the more bullish public scouts on FUS, and it is thoroughly unsurprising to me that he ended up in Carolina of all places.
Of course, and I feel like that alone should quell the doubts of public scouts. You know, if Carolina picks him up, if he's good enough for Carolina, he's up there.
Good enough for me.
Yeah, Alexander Rykov's another decent pick at 100th overall, 100th flat, and that's.
I mean, the VHL production for him was really impressive. He's defensively responsible, projects as a right wing, not as a center. But he's really intelligent. He's a good passer. He's a bit simple in how he plays. Like it's simple and effective is kind of his style.
Yeah.
And look, if you get a bottom six winger with the 100th overall pick, you are doing amazing. So yet another pick that I liked a lot. And Stanislav Yarovoy is a guy that I only loved like one viewing of, and I kind of liked him. But I heard a lot of NHL scouts really, really, really high on him. So
really,
to get him at 126, from what the sense I got was that a lot of teams had him inside their top like 60 to 70. So to get him at 126 is good value from their perspective. But I haven't watched enough to really speak to it. But one player I'm sure we both have watched a lot of.
Are we talking about Timor?
Oh, you know we are. And,
let's go.
I mean, this is a player that going into the draft, I was already 90% sure would end up putting up on a Hurricane sweater. I think he's the most Hurricanes draft pick of all time, and he was. And I'm not surprised. Michkov is a good playmaker in the offensive zone, one of the best motors in the draft class, producing really well in surprisingly large minutes in the VHL. He's playing more minutes in the VHL than the MHL, which is rare. And he needs to bulk up a bit, but he's supposed to be playing the KHL next season. So I'm very curious to see how he does then. And while I did cool on him a little bit as the year went on, and I don't quite see the same top six upside I saw flashes of earlier on the season, he's a really, really fun draft pick in this 100 range.
Absolutely. And, you know, it's one thing to have your pedal to the metal like he does constantly throughout the game, but to have the defensive acumen that he has on top of that, to have the intelligence to know when to take a step back, when to kind of shepherd players into opposing players into specific lanes, to put opposing players into trouble just through his positioning. I'm just really astounded that he was available at 163rd overall. After that, maybe Mikey Emerson was a decent pick. I liked what I saw from him with the Steel to Steel. I've watched a lot of this year, and Emerson, I'd say, was a guy that I would have taken a swing on in this range. Nothing special, pretty well-rounded in terms of his profile. But
he's Jaden Perron's teammate, so hey.
Exactly. So
I always like it when they pick teammates. Like, it's always 100%. Nice when an 18-year-old has some familiarity, especially going into development camp and they have a friend to go along with. So I like it from that perspective, from a human perspective there. But I mean, the Columbus draft class definitely rivals Carolina's. I mean, obviously they had more draft capital than Carolina did, but I mean, landing Adam Fantilli at 3rd overall is not bad business.
Speaking of teammates, Gavin Brindley at 34th overall,
also not bad business.
He's he's a better rush defender than a lot of the defenders that were picked in the 1st and 2nd rounds. He's
better than Dragosevich?
Really? Oh, wow. Are we really talking about Dragosevich's rush defending?
Let's go back to Columbus instead of that.
Poor kid. I love him, but man, he's the worst rush defender in the world.
The rush defending is painful. But
it's horrible.
Fantilli probably shouldn't have been available at 3rd overall. He probably would have gone 1st overall in the last 4 draft classes. So landing him at 3rd overall is exceptional. He is a perfect fit in Columbus. They needed a center like Fantilli, and now they have him. So amazing work. Gavin Brindley to me was a top 15 talent. He
was.
I adore the motor. It's even better than Mukhanov's, and he adds a ton of playmaking skill to that, and the pace, the intensity, the defensive acumen as well. He's really well rounded, and kind of like Jaden Perron, this is one of those players that the public had a lot higher than NHL scouts, but landing him in the second round is exceptional value. And look, William Whitelaw at 66 is also a very, very good big swing on skill, and he is all skill. He's ton of risk, but all skill. And if they can try to rein him in a little bit, get him to use his line mates more often, be a little bit less selfish on the ice, I think this could age really nicely. And look, they also drafted his teammate. Speaking of teammates, yet again, Andrew Strothman, who, look, he plays like Cale Makar, but he's not Cale Makar, which scares me. But you're picking him at 98th overall. So, hey, it's a big swing on skill, and he's ultra mobile, and he's constantly trying to create offense to a fault. Like, he takes a lot of risks that he should not be taking. But there's a really nice foundation of skill there. And when he goes to the NCAA, he's going to need to adapt. He's going to need to add some more defensive engagement and be a bit more calculated with when he takes his risks and when he activates, and perhaps in which situations where perhaps a teammate can take his spot on the blue line, which he doesn't often scan for as of yet. But he's very raw, just like Whitelaw. But the upside is also relatively high. And I think there's a chance you get a second pairing offensive defenseman with Strothman. I would have perhaps taken a swing on a guy like Aaron Manishin ahead of him, but at the same time, this is totally his range. And we'll finish off the top 5 picks for Columbus here with one of my personal favorites, Luca Pinelli. I got to watch him 40 plus times live in the last 2 years, and while he did fall down my final board because I had a lot more questions in terms of NHL projection, he is so much fun. He's a really smart player. He processes the game incredibly quickly. He's super intense. He's very effective defensively. He has a really nice one-timer, and the playmaking in his D-1 was awesome. And then he was kind of shoehorned into a finishing role in Ottawa last season, which really limited his effectiveness. It was one of the more frustrating experiences for me scouting this season, was going to every single 67s game and watching them play him on the wing in a finishing role when he is perfectly made for a role down the middle as a center, and where he could actually use his line mates, where he's not just a trigger man on a power play. And I think there's a lot of potential there. At the same time, you can't discount the role that the entire draft year season in this limited role has on a player's development. But hey, the Blue Jackets were drafting exceptionally well, and they picked Pinelli at 114. So I assume they're going to push for him to also have a perhaps more diverse role in Ottawa next season. And if he does, especially with Vincenz Rohr going pro and going over to Switzerland, there's an open slot down the middle. And while it might be gifted to Brad Gardner, I would definitely be banging the table for Pinelli to have that role.
Yeah, for sure. And just a quick shout out to Tyler Peddle being picked with the last pick of the draft.
They traded for that, and they traded for that selection. And being at the draft, I completely saw everything happen. The Peddle family was not too far from the media section, and they were looking pretty dejected by the end of the draft, because of course they were. They just spent 6 hours there, and were also caught in the thunderstorms. We couldn't leave the arena either. It was not a fun situation for them until that pick happened, and they continued the trend. It was really every single player picked out of the QMJHL had by far the loudest family celebration. Every single time. Ethan Gauthier had 25 family members at the upper level of the arena, and it sounded like they were 200, and they most certainly were not. But the QMJHL families were very vocal, and it was a nice pick for sure.
100%. So now we'll talk about some of the other teams in the Metropolitan Division and how they pick right after these messages.
But first, let's talk about our sponsors at FanDuel. Take your first swing at betting MLB on FanDuel and get 10 times your first betting amount back in free bets, up to $200. That's $200 in free bonus bets that you can use on anything, ranging from money line to over and under, or even who you think is going to swing the very first home run in the game. All on an app that's safe, secure, easy to use, but most of all, you get your winnings instantly. there's no better place to bet MLB than on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today at fanduel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in free bonus bets. That is fanduel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, the official partner of Major League Baseball.
All right, so moving on to the 3 teams from the tri-state area. We've got New Jersey and the 2 New York teams. So let's start with Jersey here. The first pick was in the second round, in the late second round at 58th overall. They went with Lenny Heminaho. Probably one of the worst skaters in the draft, but other than that, really intelligent, really defensively responsible, great
very good
shot habits as well, and he's got a great shot as well.
And his production in Liga was excellent. At the same time, I know that the two of us were among the bigger skeptics in the Dauber circle with Heminaho. What I see in him is a future elite Liga scorer. I don't see an NHLer personally. However, if you can try to leverage that intelligence and the goal scoring ability and really try to improve his off puck offensive movement, because he has the processing speed to find that at a high NHL pace. It's more just the vision of actually finding those little pockets of space that I think he needs to work on a little bit more. But hey, the goal scoring upside is definitely there, and I mean, he produced exceptionally well in Liga this year.
Absolutely. Camp Squires is a guy scouted a lot this year. I kind of had him in the 6th to 7th round range. Nothing special in terms of his production. Nothing special in terms of his abilities either, but really a well-rounded profile. A guy who can do a bit of everything. But one pick I really liked was Cole Brown at 164th overall out of the Hamilton Bulldogs. Decent value there. I believe he's an overager. Don't quote me on that. He is, yeah. And yeah, Brown is just the type of guy who just really pushes the pace. He loves to push the pace. He's got a lot of intensity to him. So I like the profile, a decent swing in the later rounds. Other than that, not much to talk about for their Jersey Devils. That's usually what happens when you trade your 1st and 3rd round picks. Moving on to the Islanders. Now, the Islanders they're another of these teams that love to trade their 1st round picks. Lou Lamoriello is allergic to 1st rounders, it seems. And especially with a prospect pool that's looking more and more like a puddle, they should probably keep a hold of those. But yeah, Danny Nelson at 49th. What do you think of that?
Very Islanders pick.
Yep.
Like, very Islanders pick. Danny Nelson, to me, is a high likelihood 4C, and I don't know how much there is beyond that. At the same time, it's always easier to try to leverage some more upside once the player is already in the NHL.
Yep.
At the same time, look, he was a good 3C in the NTDP, but I'm not convinced that the skating is and the intelligence and the processing speed and the playmaking. There's a lot of question marks there where I think the tools are a bit subpar, but the physicality is very good. I think he has a good shot. The hands flash sometimes, but he needs space to use them well. Not a player I'd be picking in the 2nd round. But again, he's a very Islanders pick, and that will improve his development curve with that organization. So they could have been worse for sure.
Yeah. Care to guess when the last time the Isles picked in the 1st round? It's 2019. That's the last time they picked in the 1st round.
It's been 4 years?
Yeah, it's been 4 years. It's pretty bad.
They're not the best team either yet.
Yeah, it's pretty rough. But moving on, I really like the Justin Gill pick at 145.
I knew you would.
Really excited to see him get picked in an NHL draft at some point.
He deserved it. He earned it.
Absolutely. Twice overager, great playmaking, a decent shot on him, but really the intensity is what stands out the most. Him and Joshua Roy and Ethan Gauthier formed one of the best lines in the QMJHL.
Yeah.
So it was really, really fun to see them go about it. So great pick in this range. Reminds me a bit of their other pick. His name's escaping me. But he was picked in. No, he was picked. William Dufour. He was picked in the 1st round.
Yeah. Of course.
5th round in 2020.
Yeah.
Great, kind of comparable for him in terms of, picking a guy who he's not the biggest, not the strongest, but really just wins a lot of battles just by sheer will. So I like this pick. Yes, and Normie was decent as well, 113th. He's the type of guy who I probably would have picked in the top 100, but I do have my reservations about the intelligence, the awareness, all that stuff. Really fluid, really solid on his skates, but you got some questions there. And I think my favorite pick of the 7th round,
Dennis Goodbog.
The Goodbog himself got picked. It's the best name.
You don't understand how excited I was to hear Dennis Goodbog on the arena announcement, like for the draft thing. Like, massive smile on my face.
Mm-hmm.
I've watched him a little bit. Not a player I would have selected, but you have to appreciate the elite hockey names, and that is really up there.
100%. Now, finally, for this segment, we'll move on to the New York Rangers. Now, the New York Rangers went out with a big swing in the first round with Gabriel Perreault.
Which I was not expecting from that organization.
I was not at all. He's not their typical pick either. Like, not at all. But Gabe Perreault is arguably one of the smartest and best
top three smartest.
Forward. Yeah.
Top three smartest in the class. Like, I think in terms of IQ, it is him, Benson, Bedard in the top tier, and then you have Michkov just slightly below, and then Smith. And a couple other names down there, but with Perreault, you're drafting him for the brain and the skill, his intelligence, his awareness, his handling ability, and his playmaking are all slam dunk elite tools.
Yeah.
The question is, can he tie all those together in a toolkit that is comprehensive for the NHL? Mm-hmm. And as the season went on, I warmed up to the likelihood of that happening, and. Mm-hmm. Look, in the end, I had him ranked, I think, 21st overall, which was quite a big jump from where I had him for most of the season. But again, I love to swing on tools and on intelligence. And in the end, I think just from like a philosophical point of view in terms of the scouting, I had to do it. But he scares. He gives me the heebie-jeebies. Like the combination of absolute lack of physicality, defensive engagement, and poor skating ability is a rough one for the NHL.
That's the tough thing for him is how does he compensate for that? Now, he's smart enough to move off the puck well. Can he apply that to the defensive zone? Can he apply that to rush defending, getting back early?
Can he consistently not just find but stay in pockets of space offensively? That is my biggest question, because he scores all of his goals by being at the right place at the right time.
100%.
And he can do that against junior competition because he's not being physically overwhelmed around the slot.
100%.
In the pro game, however, that is going to be different. At the same time, he is by far like the situation with him of staying with his line with Smith and Leonard. I think that will benefit Perreault the most from the three. I think staying in that situation while transitioning to the NCAA will really facilitate his translation to a big jump in competition. And I'm really curious to see how he does, because he could be a player that in a redraft goes top 8. He could also be a player that in a redraft goes outside the top 100. Like, I'm saying redraft in 5 to 10 years time, obviously, but not in 1 year, but he's a massive risk, and he's not one I was expecting the Rangers to make. So I like that pick a lot, because look, when teams diverge from their typical drafting philosophies and take risks, always makes me happy.
100%. Now, a quick word on Drew Fortescue being, I believe, the first NTDP defenseman off the board. What's your thoughts on that?
I think Cleveland went over him.
Oh, was he?
Yeah, I think Cleveland went 3 picks ahead. Almost.
Oh, shoot.
Very close. Very, very close.
Yeah. But Fortescue, what's your thoughts on him?
I think he's perfectly acceptable in this range. Again, not the guy I'd be swinging on. There were players with high upside that were left on the board. I mean, Jaden Perron went 4 picks later, so I can't compare those two players.
Yeah.
At the same time, you can do a lot worse than Fortescue in this range. We saw a lot of picks that I thought were bigger reaches than this, and he also fits that New York Rangers defensive style. So
absolutely,
I don't mind it. The pick I found funny and liked a lot was Dylan Rubruck. I watched quite a bit of him, because he played with Callum Ritchie, and he's fun. He's massive. He's 6'7". He looks like he's this year's Kirill Dolzhenkov. That's all I'm gonna say. I find this funny. This is a great entertaining selection, and if he makes the NHL, I'm gonna have a blast watching him there, because he's kind of wonky, but he's a good puck protector purely because he has the reach of a 747, and it's great. I love this. It's fun. In the later rounds, you can do a lot worse than swing on a guy with decently good hands, and again, 6'7". It's fun.
No, absolutely. Now we'll move on to our last segment involving the Philadelphia Flyers, Pittsburgh Penguins, and Washington Capitals right after these messages. All right, so let's close things off with the for me the best pick of the top 10 here, starting with Philly. Matvei
Best pick of
Michkov
the draft. I don't care.
probably.
It's between him and Benson at 13, but I think Michkov takes
it's
the cake.
close. But yeah, Michkov at 7 for me is highway robbery. I cannot understand how a potential Hall of Famer was available at 7th overall. And I've spoken at length about Michkov at the start of the year, about how much I like him, how much I think he's got potential. For me, there's a lot of elements in this game that are borderline elite. Nothing that's properly 100% elite, except for the sixth sense for danger that he has in the offensive zone. It's just insane how good he is at flaring danger. But the shot's up there for sure. Now for me, he's up there with Bedard in terms of goal scoring potential, isn't he?
Pure goal scoring, yeah. I also think the playmaking is going to be a lot better than people expect. You have to realize he's playing with HK Sochi this season, and that team consisted of Matvei Michkov, and that's about it.
Yeah,
he was by far their best player. He was their only creative outlet. He was doing everything, and his playmaking game grew a ton this season. It just didn't really get the results in terms of points because he didn't really have the line mates to finish his chances. So my bet is next season in the KHL, he's going to be over a point a game, and he's going to have more assists than people expect. But the skill, the intelligence, he's one of those rare slam dunk triple threat offensive talents.
Yeah,
in my mind, elite goal scorer, like from shooting ability, but also finding space to use it and changing angles on his release to get around defensive structures and get away from sticks. Amazing. He's an elite playmaker in my view. He's top 5 in the class in playmaking in my opinion. I think he's excellent in that facet, and the handling skill is almost as good.
Got it.
You cannot do better at 7th overall. Like
100%.
Incredible selection. I love it. Oliver Bonk at 22, I'm a bit more hesitant on.
Yeah, a bit.
But it's a great name. And look, Oliver Bonk, I think, in my opinion, is going to be a shutdown defensive guy in the NHL. Probably bottom pairing, but could be a number 4 if he really worked on his toolkit, if he really improved his skating specifically. The offensive creativity isn't really there. Most of his production came off of shots from the point. However, look, a lot of public scouts that have watched him a whole lot more than I have like him a ton. And I respect all of their work a lot. So I'm keeping an open mind with Oliver Bonk, but he's not a player I personally would have picked in the first round.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And the two goalies after that, Carson Bjarnason and Yegor Zavragin, I've gotten a lot more bullish on Zavragin as the year went on, especially in the later months. April,
I like that
May,
pick
June,
more than
Bjarnason at 51. Yeah. Absolutely. Bjarnason at 51 is way too high for me. But then after that is probably one of my favorite players in the entire draft. Denver Barkey. They called him and Easton Cowan were called the twins over in London, and for good reason. They play very similar profiles and games. Just Barkey's one of the most intense.
He's more skilled.
He's a bit more skilled for me, but I especially love the back-checking energy. Not just the energy, but the intelligence with which he gets back and lifts opponents' sticks and gets under their sticks and just makes breaking out the puck absolute hell for the opposition. I think this is fantastic value at 95. And then my personal favorite overager from this draft, Cole
He's great.
103rd is just fantastic.
Fantastic. I mean, look, I would have picked him last year. I loved him last year, and his progression in the offseason was spectacular. He came a long, long way and is a way more intriguing prospect this time around. And he was already pretty damn good last year. So that was an awesome pick. And even better somehow was their pick at 120, landing Alex Ciernik, who, in my opinion, is one of the more underappreciated skilled players in this draft class.
Arguably first-round value. First-round value.
He's an exceptional skater. His stride reminds me a lot of Jesse Ylönen's. He needs to add some lower body strength to really up that explosiveness. But like the knee bend, the ankle flexion, it's mechanically beautiful. He's a great skater. He's very perimeter based, but he's also an amazing playmaker, and he was doing that in a pro league in Hockeyallsvenskan, which is not a league where you usually see draft eligibles really excel. And his playmaking data in that league was leaps and bounds ahead of Dalibor Dvorsky's, who obviously is a goal scorer, but went 10th overall. And Alex Ciernik did not. And his handling ability is great. You're really working with those three things. It's the skating, the handling, the playmaking. The shot is bad, Like the shot needs a lot of work. He's not all a dual threat yet, and the defensive game is really hit or miss. Sometimes it can be mediocre, and most of the time it's painful. At the same time, you are taking a swing on a potential second line winger at 120th overall, and I would have picked him top 100 easy. I had him ranked, I think, 30th overall on my board. So landing him this late to me is exceptional value as well.
Absolutely. Now we'll have to go real quick for Pittsburgh and Washington. It's running a bit out of time, but we'll get this done for you. So first and foremost, Pittsburgh's first round pick at 14th overall, Braden Yeager. This is high for me. I love the scoring. I love the playmaking ability, which has improved in leaps and bounds as the year went on. But I still have a lot of questions about projectability, about hockey sense, and especially about defensive and physical impact with Yeager. It's going to be an uphill battle to get him to become a top 6 player, but he's got the toolkit in terms of a skill set with the puck in order to have that impact. It's just a matter of bringing his game up there. Outside of that, Emil Jarventie is a funny one at 217th overall. He was one guy that our head scout before he left had.
E2 was not a fan.
Oh my god, he had him as a do not draft from.
He had him as a do not draft as of September. It was immediate. I watched him. I mean, I wouldn't have drafted him, but he would not have been a D&D on my list either.
Absolutely.
But the pick I liked for the Penguins was Cooper Foster, who I've also watched a ton of in Ottawa here, and he's very fun. He has a good motor. He's a decent playmaker in tight, one-touch playmaking ability. More like perhaps not like the best cross-crease passer. He's not the most creative necessarily, but he blends his intensity with passing ability and just quick plays. He's a high-paced guy. I think you could like in the late hundreds. Totally fair value with Cooper Foster.
100%. And then moving on to Washington, Ryan Leonard at 8 is good value for me. This is his range without no problem.
I had him ranked 8th overall. This is perfect. This is great.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We can move on from that. Andrew Crystal at 40th overall, just insane value for me. Crystal,
he's super risky. There's a very good chance he never touches the NHL, but he could be a first liner. If he pans out, he could be an elite playmaker. He's one of the fastest processors in the entire draft class. The skating really needs work because he has no separation gear, which is not what you can really live with his style of play, which is all offense, and he relies on creating off the rush, which he won't be able to do as currently constructed in the NHL. However, he's really shifty. He's escapable. And look, give him power skater for the next 3 seasons, and we'll see how that goes. And the defensive engagement needs work, but Kelowna was not a good team this year. Crystal and Caden Price are both super raw players that should not have been tasked with leading that team because they need support because they're super skilled. But again, they're not necessarily the most mature players in this draft class. But landing Crystal at 40th overall is incredible value. Like, look, even if he doesn't make it, you took a swing on a guy that could have been an elite player for years to come, and you could do a whole lot worse at 40.
For sure. And just a quick word on Cam Allen at 136. I think this is a major overcorrection. Yeah, no, it's a major overcorrection. I love his skill set. He gave me headaches this year, for sure. I mean, there were times this year where he genuinely was hard to watch, but he's got skills. He's really good with the puck, physical, defensively, but still. You know, it's just
he's intense defensively. He has some grit. He has some snarl. He plays with some violence at times. Yeah. And at Dauber, I mean, I started out as an OHL scout, like in September, and he was a guy that I kind of planted my flag in as like I was the guy that was really low on Cam Allen because at the time Cam Allen was viewed as a top 10 prospect, and I was like, I think he should go in the second round. That never changed for me. I stuck at that. Like I saw him playing. Decision-making issues for sure. That's why he fell. But look, he's also Team Canada's captain at the U18s. He's really mobile. He's fun in transition as a carrier. There's some potential there. Yeah. There's a chance he becomes a versatile number 4 defenseman. But what he isn't is the offensive driver that Guelph expected him to be. And that's why he fell. Because in the role that he was playing, it was very, very clear that he should not be the offensive defenseman from the blue line because in the offensive zone, he was shooting by default. The shooting habits were awful. Yeah. But I think, look, shooting habits are pretty correctable, especially for defensemen. And to land him at 136 overall is absurd. It shouldn't have happened. But hey, here we are. And I think Washington got a pretty fun prospect as a result.
Absolutely. So that wraps things up for our breakdown of the Metropolitan Division. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment saying what you think. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please remember to make us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, make sure to check out the Locked On NHL Mock Draft Special. All 32, all of the channel hosts that were drafting in the first round came together and put together a mock draft. Myself and Gil Martin from Locked On Islanders came together on the Locked On NHL network and reacted to each pick. So make sure to check that out. So my name is Hadi Kalikesh. Joined with me is Sebastian Hai, our co-host, and we wish to see you next time. Make sure to tune in.